Welcome to Ready Row USA. We have an exciting episode here in store for you with the scary stuff. We had originally scheduled this for Halloween, but we weren't able to get it on. And Ryan Worth is here with lessons learned, best case scenarios and worst case scenarios, or starting with the worst and going to the best, I guess, right, Ryan?
Yes, to some extent. I think we're actually just got ourselves into talking about all the worst, but
yeah, and then we're going to learn our lessons from that. Yeah. And we'll also be previewing the coaches track on the U.S. Rowing Conference Convention that's coming up December 5th through the 8th in Philadelphia. So we're all excited about that. Ready Row USA will be there and reporting daily. So it's very exciting. In the booth, I'm your producer, Charlotte Pierce. We have our new assistant producer and wonderful high school coach, Shannon Borum. And we are grateful to our correspondents, Mark Wilson, Ryan Worth, who's hosting today, Tara Morgan of Seize the Oar, Will Ruth of Strength Coach Roundtable, Reba Knickerbocker, who's going to be speaking at the convention on the women's and masters track. She's with Ben the Blade Coaching Consulting. Ben Booth and Michael Knowles are our coastal correspondents, and Veronica Platzer is out in Boulder community rowing and contributes. We are grateful to all of them. Some of them will be reporting from the convention, so stay tuned. And you can always, this is our 39th episode actually, and we're aiming for 50 by the end of the year. So that'll be kind of an exciting celebration on January 1st. And today our host, Ryan Worth, dives into rowing's worst case and best case safety scenarios, and we'll highlight a few speakers in the coaches programming track, as I mentioned. You can subscribe for notifications at rowing.chat. We feature the best of rowing news, interviews, gadgets, and gear, and we try and connect clubs, companies, and rowers across the country. We are part of the International Rowing Chat Network. And first, we are grateful to also our sponsors who make it possible for us to put on the podcast and bring all this information to you. If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, November to March rowing means that many of you are back in the boat after taking a winter break. And you know that can mean blisters on your hands. And then in the Northern Hemisphere, the switch to erg training can add new friction points to your hands. So in any hemisphere, rowing gloves make a great holiday gift, and stocking stuffer. And Rebecca Caro of Rowing Chat has written a comprehensive guide to rowing gloves, and that you'll find that on rowing.chat/sponsor/rowing-gloves. And we also have a new sponsor, Rowing Related. It's independent journalism for rowers. Rowing Related, and Brian Kitch is the editor, and he has a special for Rowing Chat listeners. So please go to our rowing.chat/sponsors page for the link to that. It's a 20% discount on your first subscription. And we also have a wonderful seat. If you get a sore butt when rowing, you're not alone. We have tested this out. Rebecca Caro has tested this out. She's our executive producer, and she checks out all our sponsor gear. So the Citrus Remix seat was born after Danish international lightweight Eskild Ebbesen not only got a sore backside, but he also lost feeling in his legs during long ergs. So they developed this seat pad, and Rebecca tried it out. And after an initial adaptive period of the odd sensation, she found that it was very helpful in the medium size, medium stiffness. Again, rowing.chat/sponsors is where you'll find information and discounts on these items. So Ryan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Charlotte?
Good. And what's going on down there in Chattanooga?
Oh, it's just kind of cold, and I'm just up the road here from Shannon down in the Atlanta area. Welcome, Shannon.
Thanks. It's cold down here too. I finally feel like I fit in with you guys.
Yeah, well, it was 18 in Boston and 20 in Chattanooga, which is very odd.
Yeah, it's a lot. Some of Tennessee got snow yesterday. Schools ran on a delay, and all my ranting all fall season about how we don't ever need to go off the water in Tennessee is really hard to sell right now, as it's yesterday morning was like 20 miles an hour of wind and 20 degrees.
Well, we know it can be beautiful because I've been down there rowing with you, and it is stunning. But I'm going to duck out now and let you guys take over and talk about safety and all the ways you can learn from the horrible things that happen on the waters. Thanks.
Well, and that's exactly it. Shannon and I are going to bring a show today, and we're just going to kind of highlight some of the common accidents and things that can make rowing not fun. And I think that acknowledging what's scary is important, because if we're afraid of it, that means that it has value and has and there's some merit to thinking about it and the way things happen. I think for rowers and rowing coaches, especially, Shannon, you probably share this, one of the scariest things that we face that's unique to us is damage to our equipment.
Yeah, and we store everything outside, so this picture, strikes fear into my heart.
And as a lot of people do. So, we're not going to dive into this. There are some good resources linked through US Rowing. We actually have some of these links that'll be in our show notes, but there is one link there on US Rowing safety page to trailer laws and regulations. And there are some resources out there kind of hidden in ways to, safely trailer and things like that. I think that still the best form of learning that information is word of mouth and mentors. We do have some images here we're scrolling through of some equipment accidents. Most equipment damage happens on the road. So, as Shannon said, that the idea of having a tree fall on your rack of boats and smash them all in half is real and has happened. The equipment insurers will tell you that. But where you're most likely to have an equipment accident is on the road. So being able to hook and haul a trailer properly is a good first step. Shannon, who does your trailering for your team?
We are brand new and super small, so we don't. We actually just rent stuff wherever we're going. So this is one of those things we don't worry about yet.
Yep.
However, in the Atlanta area, we've got several college clubs and master's clubs. And I remember probably 10 years ago, one of the college clubs took a wrong turn, and I think they destroyed about 5 boats right off the back of the trailer.
Yep. Yeah. Clipping the sterns off the back when the overhang is super common. Every single head race I went to this fall had a trailer accident on the way in that broke boats. And so obviously that's one of our points of great exposure. We've got a picture here that was actually a Row 2K photo of the day. One of the Atlanta Masters rowers with the coxswain seat and stern deck of a Resolute 4.
Yeah, that's Chris, and that's just one of the best pictures I think the club ever had. Sad, but good.
And that was a very recent incident. That was simply a matter of a boat on the very highest rack that had a bow strap that probably either got worn through by those thick gunnels or those sharp gunnels on a Resolute or what, on its way to Grand Rapids at Masters Nats. And the bow strap breaks, the bow goes up because it was on the top rack and snapped right at where the stern strap was. Yeah, scary stuff. And trailer jackknifing, we do have long trailers. A lot of times our axles are centered under the load. That's actually kind of part of what makes rowing shell trailers unique. And in the US, we're an oddity in the rowing world because we don't really row sectional eights. But regardless, in most places, the axle of the rowing trailer is generally farther forward than it would be in most trailers. In most types of trailers, the axle would be farther back to reduce the overhang behind the axle. So that just means weight distribution during loading is an important thing to consider. You got to make sure that you have enough tongue weight that the trailer doesn't want to sway too much and push itself around a tow vehicle. And then just having a tow vehicle that's rated well enough. I don't want to necessarily pitch Enterprise here, but they do a great job with their commercial rentals of honoring a US rowing rate that with their 3/4 ton trucks for bumper towing trailers is really, really affordable. So if you're a club that's going to be on the road maybe 20 days a year, you're probably only going to spend about $2,000 a year in truck rental. It ends up being about $90 a day for their 3/4 tons at the US rowing rate. So if you're a club that has trouble with that and you're always looking around, some people use U-Haul. I've had a little bit of luck in the past with heavy equipment rental companies, but those trucks are usually construction trucks, but Enterprise does a great job. And for their 3/4 tons, they are a great rate. Anyhow, moving on to talking about incidents on the water. And that's certainly a place where things can get broken. Shannon, for you, the bodies of water you row on, there's never anything to hit, right?
Well, there's a couple things you could run into, and we've tried real hard, but for the most part, it's pretty open. We don't deal with bridges. We don't deal with currents. We just have a very lovely flat reservoir.
And how about the bottom of that reservoir?
Haven't reached it yet, so that's a good thing. It's pretty deep for us. I mean, it's a pretty considerably safe spot to teach kids how to row. I mean, it's a whole lot different than rowing in Atlanta on the Hooch, where there could be a sandbar one day and not the next day, or a super fast current and then nothing. It's a pretty stable place to teach novice rowers.
Right. But I think that is a oddity in our sport. I think most of us end up rowing on bodies of water with current, with obstacles, navigational hazards. Like you said, at the Hooch, the sandbars move around. And so one day where you could think you're perfectly good, the next day your skeg is digging in and you're bottoming out. I think for people on inland waterways that are navigable and have large steel channel markers, you also have freight traffic with those. Down here in Chattanooga, we're along very popular motor yacht cruising routes, in addition to having freight tugs moving through. Actually, Friday night of the Hooch, we got to watch a freight tug plow over all the buoys in the last 400 meters of the race course. And some of them did not come back up. So some of those volunteers got out early that morning. But I think the image of your novice 4 going under one of those freight barges, probably most coaches have to consciously avoid that image haunting them too much. Anyhow, getting a little off track there, I think one of the biggest hazards that rowers actually face on most of our bodies of water is each other. So we've got, Shannon, you've had these images from this article. I remember this happening last year. And what was that?
This is just one of those incidences where, an Olympic single sculler is out practicing, and I can't remember if it's a quad or a double, and I can't tell from the picture. They weren't paying attention to where they were going, and they were impaled by Mahe Drysdale.
Literally, he's on a course doing a piece, and these
full pressure piece too. Yeah,
got themselves.
And in that beautiful boat. And if you're looking at the pictures, you can tell that beautiful boat is not beautiful at the moment this picture was taken.
Yeah.
Luckily everyone was okay. Ended hopefully a little bad streak for Mahe in 2018. But if you put yourself in the place of those kids, that's a pretty scary event. Which is why, as coaches and as rowers, we just really have to pay attention to what we're doing when we're on the water.
Absolutely. And I think that's exactly it. One of the other things that comes to mind when I think about boating accidents is the famous YouTube video, Ignatius, stop rowing. Ignatius, stop rowing. Ignatius, stop rowing. And they just go, this 8 just plows headlong right into a pole, snaps a couple of oars, a couple of the port rowers get ejected. That's always a crowd favorite. YouTube has a small wealth of these. Good videos. There's a good one that came out last year from a bumps race, and one 8 gets stopped behind some other 8s, and the 8 behind them is just plowing past, and the bow deck of the oncoming 8 goes over Stroke's rigger. The bow ball hits him in the chest, and the whole bow of the boat rides right up over Stroke's seat. So both of those incidents there, the Mahe impalement on the other boat, and then this crash where the bow ball actually hits one of the rowers in the chest, are good reminders of why we have the bow balls. And so as we talk about the scary stuff, I think one of the things to remember is these pieces of safety kit and why we use them. There are some pictures out there on the internet that you can find of the bow section of a old wooden 8 through the calf of a guy on a stretcher getting carried away.
I've seen that, and that one is painful.
Yeah. And obviously it's the bodily injury, and we're going to get into that we're really worried about. The equipment, we want to keep it safe, but it's the bodily injury. And on this next slide, Shannon found another picture though, when I get thinking about the launches, because the coaching launches are there for safety, but they're also potentially one of the most dangerous things that we put our athletes into as coaches when we're out on the water, is the environment where they're right next to a motorized watercraft. But there was this picture that made its rounds on Instagram a couple years ago of a Filippi, I think it was a women's quad, that managed to put its bow right through the transom of an 8 or of a coaching launch. So that's a less common sight or story to hear, is that a rowing shell takes out a launch. But there are a handful of documented cases and a few others that I just know about. And if I know about a few, then I know there's a lot of people or coaches falling out of launches, losing control of launches, hitting, and then in some cases they have hit rowers.
And
so,
the important thing that illustrates for our rowers, I think, we make a big deal of these boats are fragile. Let's take care of boats. Let's take care of boats. But when you see them impale a metal launch, that sort of drives home to your rowers. These actually could do some damage, and I don't think they always recognize that, because we focus a lot on the boats are very, they're fragile. Let's take care of them.
I just wanted to jump in here with some questions, if you guys are ready to take a couple questions.
Yeah, so we had one here about colder water, and basically the question is, scared to take my single out when it's below freezing. When should I stop rowing? And that was kind of something that Shannon and I were both talking about here in the Southeast. We don't ever really need to stop rowing. There are some good guidelines using combined air and water temperature. But yeah, anytime you're rowing on a body of water where the water's below about 60 degrees, then your exposure to cold is certainly a big concern. I think that to answer this question, one of the things to consider is the rower's ability level, in addition to the environmental concerns, and then what type of single they're rowing and what kind of safety precautions you had. A couple weeks ago, we spoke with Ben Booth, he'll row all winter off the coast of Massachusetts, out on the Atlantic, which is a good example of a place where the conditions are very cold and potentially dangerous. You just have to know how to handle it. Here in Chattanooga, the club has a rule at a certain water temperature, I think it's 55 degrees, where you're not allowed to be in a boat with less than 4 oars. So double, 4, quad being the smallest. I think that's a nice step if you can do that.
And I think the other part of that is who else is on the water with you. If you're out by yourself and you're questioning if it's too cold, to me, that's probably too cold.
Yeah, I think, and I don't think erging has ever actually made anybody slower. I think in the South, we deny that the teams that erg for 4 or 5 months a year are just as fast as us because we don't want to admit that the indoor training would be fine. And I think there's a balance there. At what point are your athletes going to be so distracted, or you as the athlete so distracted by the risk of cold or how cold you are, that you're not getting anything done? Now, a crew from Ithaca, New York is going to scoff at what standards we'll put ourselves at down here, but that's a little bit environmentally, and kind of similar to the trailer thing. I have to say that one of your best resources, despite everything online, is probably still peers and mentor coaches. Anyhow, Shannon, let's keep moving here and kind of talk about the part of the show that is just not fun to talk about, which is these incidences that go bad and result in fatalities.
Right. And so the most recent case was out of Northwestern, and Mohammed Ramzan actually had an ejector crab and came out of the boat and he drowned. And so that sort of highlights, number one, we need to be checking that our rowers are safe in the water. It came to light after he passed away that he actually didn't know how to swim. So that's kind of big issue number one. Down here at my club, we do a swim test, and I think a lot of folks do a swim test. Not saying that that's going to prevent anything, because once you get in that water, you never know what's going to happen. There have been several stories. I think one of the pictures that we highlighted earlier, a young girl actually got pinned under the water because her hair was stuck in a rigger.
Yep.
So you can prevent as much as possible, but accidents do happen.
Absolutely. And if you're interested in kind of seeing if you're a coach or an individual rower or a board member who's interested in kind of trying to to see a good survey of rowing incidents, rowsafeusa.org has a nice just compiled list, and you will see the fatalities in red. Most of the fatalities are basically drowning related, and similar to any style of boating, that's usually the case. Some of them are accidents with motorboats, and so we basically see those as our two biggest risk factors in our sport, is the drowning, being out of the boat, or being seriously injured or killed in a collision with a motorized craft, or potentially with an obstruction on the river. And so it's a very sobering thing to do, is to read through those reports. U.S. rowing, I feel like we could definitely, that could be a resource for our members that could be really helpful. British rowing does a nice job of compiling incident reports, with U.S. rowing doesn't. And they actually even put out pie charts, and they have a required reporting system there. So they get reports of all incidents, everything from two boats running into each other to things that are worse. And more than 50% of the incidents that you see reported in their reports are directed to the cause of someone not maintaining a lookout or not being well enough aware. So basically, somebody running into something where a coxswain or a bowman could have avoided that. For all of us that coach and are on the water with the rowers, we are those eyes. I don't know about you, Shannon, but sometimes I feel like I'm actually the one most at risk on the water running into something, because I'm paying attention to the coxswains and the bow seats, which are in turn paying attention to where they're going, but not where I'm going.
100% agree with that one.
And so that kind of brings me back around to one of my pet peeves, which is our kill switch lanyards. And anybody operating a boat stands the chance of accidentally becoming the most dangerous thing out there if you were to fall out of the launch. The boats do not stop just because you're not in them anymore. And I think once you've been around the sport a little while, you start hearing stories. And we see it happen with drivers of referee launches at regattas. We see it happen with very experienced coaches. There was an incident in New Zealand a couple years ago that the coach, actually, one of New Zealand's quite good coaches, just kind of stumbled a little in the launch, hit the throttle, and his launch hit the boat, injured one of his rowers with the prop, and gave another rower a bad head injury. And so not only was it a career-ending incident for the coach, but it was a dangerous incident for some of the athletes. And I think just the worst case scenario, short of someone actually dying. And Kippy Liddle is another probably pretty well-known example of a worst case scenario. She was a coach in Philadelphia. And Shannon, do you kind of know the backstory on that and where we
I know enough of it to know that we got to be paying attention to coaches as well. So there was an incident on the water, and somehow she got out of the launch and ended up, I think she went over I'm not sure.
Yeah, she went over the dam there, right in front of Boathouse Row in Philadelphia.
Right, and did not come back up, tragically. But U.S. Rowing, in her honor, does these amazing safety kits that if you're a club, you should probably look into one of those. If you don't want one of those kits, you need to have all the stuff in it every time you go on the water.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. The kits are a great value for U.S. Rowing affiliated programs, but you can get everything together. You basically, as a motorboat, you need to be conscious of the rules and regulations in your state and on your body of water for operating your motorboat. And then you are also carrying the flotation devices for your rowers, unless you are a rower who is carrying something on your own. Our policy, if you score below a certain level on our swim assessment, is that you wear a waist belt, a fanny pack style inflatable, so that you have the PFD on you instead of having to wait for it to get tossed to you, and etc. So anyway, noise making devices, and then lights. This is another thing that I see all over the country, people just not doing a very good job of, is making sure that they're well lit during the early morning and evening hours. All that a rowing shell needs to be lit with is white lights. We don't have to have navigational lights like a powered watercraft, but we need to be well lit with white lights in any direction. So anyway, that's my other soapbox. Kill switch lanyards and PFDs for the coaches, because no one's a very good swimmer when you're unconscious, and then well lit during low light rowing situations. You can buy rechargeable headlamps on Amazon for like $10 and they work fine.
So do you want to talk about maybe some more kind of quickly, because we need to scoot on out, but sort of the mental health issues that rowers and coaches may face?
Absolutely. This is a massive topic, but outside of the physical concerns for our equipment and ourselves, the mental health piece is important. You've got the social aspect of middle, high school, collegiate, or master's programs. And so you could say that you just need to be an adult about it, right, and handle things. But I think also the phrase that high school never ends is really important to remember. And sometimes around a boathouse, all the cattiness and the pickiness and things like that will really come through. I think for most masters rowers, you have the opposite experience, but it's good for us all to be on the lookout for someone who's feeling isolated or being put down by teammates. I guess that's one of the other things I'd like to mention here, Shannon, is that for people who are very competitive athletes that are spending a lot of their personal time on training, that depression and other types of mental illness can be a lot more common than we want to admit, and can be very unrecognizable in those cases. So if you feel like your head's just not in a good spot, then it's good to talk to somebody. If you want to become more competitive, I think that the mental skills aspect of rowing is very understated. And because at the end of the day, when you have margins that are so close, it's not the equipment, it's not the training, it's the mental game that really sets crews apart. So not only from a health standpoint, but from a competitive standpoint. Safe Sport was rolled out in 2013. So that was something U.S. Rowing adopted along with all of our other Olympic sports to help protect athletes from inappropriate behavior. And we're going to just cruise on through this to end the episode here, but we've got good resources that will be available on the website, and so in the show notes section of that, and then also just checking out the U.S. Rowing page. They've got one page of safety with some good links, and then the one on Safe Sport has some good stuff. U.S. Rowing certified coaches are required to be Safe Sport certified. And Shannon, you recently did your level 2, is that right?
I think I did maybe a year or two ago and finished up the mentoring. I was in transition between moving from Atlanta to kind of down here in the middle of nowhere where I live now. But yeah, I definitely remember doing all of these things, and it was honestly kind of like the scariest part when you realize you're so responsible for so many things. You kind of can't take any of it for granted.
Sure. Now, as far as the Safe Sport piece of it, having been a couple years out, how do you remember that being as far as helping inform you and make you better prepared to handle things like that?
So I'm also a classroom teacher, and it kind of dovetailed a lot into what we have to do with safe relationships between coaches and rowers, looking for things that you need to maybe intervene if your rowers are being unhealthy, and just generally having a good, safe team. Those are the things that are foremost in my mind now that you sort of pop quizzed me. Don't tell my instructors.
Yeah, sorry about that. But no, I do think that the Safe Sport resources are good for really anybody, a parent, a board member, a coach. It's not too long an online class. You can click through it, and it's pretty well laid out. Moving on, one of the last other questions that we got was from a coach. As a coach, what's the best way to correct chronic unsafe behavior in rowers? And Shannon, this could be an entire episode. I guess I want to say that in my interpretation of this, chronic unsafe behavior could be the way they're actually moving, the movement pattern, potentially just not using very good posture or mechanical progression through the stroke. So I think that's something that you just have to continually as a coach be aware of. And then for masters rowers, I guess that's something to kind of be aware of too, knowing the difference in like a good pain from working hard and then a bad pain. But I think maybe the other thing that Shannon and I have touched on is that chronic unsafe behaviors are often just individuals. You know, we get into eating disorders, mental disorders, body dysmorphia, especially with your adolescent team members.
Yes.
So I don't know, Shannon, in my experience, they think the best thing to do is just have these conversations, let people normalize it, know that it's a thing, and be there together to support people in basically staying away from those chronic.
100%. And actually, you know, having those conversations and doing constant check-ins. I coach high school students. I have a couple girls that I'm always curious about. Why are they making, you're always on the lookout for eating disorders. Even when I rode as a master's level rower, one of the girls that I rode with, after rowing, she trained intensely and she was 100% rowing everything. A year later, she sort of admitted, I've relapsed with my anorexia, and the overtraining really was a part of it too. So we have to just constantly be paying attention to how much, how hard, how little, what's going on. Know your athletes.
Yeah. Well,
hey guys, I wanted to just jump in here a little bit. I promised our listeners a little preview of the coaches programming track, which kind of relates to what we've been talking about, but
absolutely
at the U.S. Rowing Convention coming up. So we'll be there, and Ryan, you'll be doing you'll be on a panel, right?
No, not that I'm aware of. I think I'm just going to be helping with some coverage, going as a referee, and then I'm also going to do the weightlifting thing on Sunday.
Oh, cool.
Okay. U.S. Rowing weightlifting coaches.
But there's some great stuff coming up, and I know they've introduced a coxswain's track too, and a bunch of new coverage.
Yeah, U.S. Rowing is doing a good job of making conventions something very fun. Echoing on what Shannon and I were just discussing, just having the opportunity to be with peer coaches or for the masters track, pure masters. There's I know that Jim and Charles Huthmaker are doing a section on rigging. That's always a hot topic for masters.
Jim Dietz?
Jim Dietz, yeah.
Yeah. Can't wait.
They're teaching a rigging topic.
Yeah.
And the coaches program, though, so that's the master's track. There's a coxswain's track. There's a juniors track. There's a level 2 certification class. There's a level 3 coaching certificate class being taught to a small select group that's kind of in beta. But then there's also the basically advanced coaches conference or coaches conference. It's a lot of very good presenters doing anything from discussing very specifics of sports mechanics or injury or, like how to build culture to, I think Mike Taty's thing for the last 10 years has just been basically watching film with Mike Taty, listening to him talk about it. And everybody still goes. Like I still go to it. And every single time you watch it, you get something new out of it.
Well, it's the commentary and analysis you get probably at the same time. And we'll be doing some of that. We'll be Ready Row USA will be putting on a live and compiled show of interviews in the evening after the sessions are done. So we'll kind of recap some of that and do some commentary and analysis, and maybe hopefully make a richer experience for people who couldn't go or who are going and couldn't get to all the tracks.
People like me who have to do their real job.
I'm sorry, Shannon. I tried to.
I'm going to be tuned in as much as possible.
Good. On November 7th, we interviewed Reba Knickerbocker, who's in this photo, on a launch, I believe. Is that a launch? Yeah, that's a launch. She's going to be talking on the women's and masters track, and she's one of my favorite kind of mindfulness visualization. She's got a really good line on that kind of stuff. Anyway, we'll be updating you again next week. We're going to have Allison Polini. She's one of our special correspondents, talking about. She will be talking about self-coaching, and we'll have another segment on the conference and some of the speakers coming up there. So we appreciate your attention, and we would like to cover your own personal rowing club. So if you can send in your rowing news, talk about events, regattas. No topic is too small and or too big. We want to hear from the rowing clubs out there across the land. And we also are gearing up for our November 27th gadgets, gear, and gifts. So we need to have, you know, your favorite gifts for rowers and rowing heroes and coaches like Ryan and Shannon. Need to get a nice little gift. Again, our sponsors, we are so grateful. It allows us to put this show on. You can find all the information at rowing.chat/sponsors. There's a lot to say about the products that they have come up with and the discounts and deals that you can get. Again, our hashtag is actually, this is not the hashtag. It's USRC, RRUSA/USRC. So US Rowing Convention. But safety first is what we're all about today. And my publishing company is one of the sponsors, as well as Mark Wilson, who is our senior correspondent and runs the All-American Rowing Camps. He'll be on again next week, I believe, with Beth Allison. Ryan, are you going to be around next week for? I'm
around. I've got almost 4,000 miles of driving lined up between here and Thanksgiving.
That's amazing.
Moving some stuff around. So,
well, I think Allison is going to be doing that self-coaching bit. And if you have some more observations on what's coming up at the convention or self-coaching, you know, that's good. It's something a lot of us have to deal with is, you know, we can't always take a rowing class or, you know,
I'm looking forward to hearing from Allison. She has great insight on what the majority of masters have to do, which is stay competitive without the of a team.
And she's at Carnegie Lake. She rows out of there, which is a really cool place to be. We have a lot of exciting episodes coming up. So next week, the 20th is gadgets or the self-coaching. And then after that is gadgets, gear, and gifts. And then we'll be getting into our pre-convention coverage. And, you know, it'll be applicable to anyone, even if you're not going to the convention. So I think you'll get a lot out of it.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Thank you guys for coming on. You're the best. This was, I mean, clearly it's got to be another, we have to have another episode because there's too much to cover.
We do.
Yeah.
And we'd be remiss in forgetting to mention another very recent fatality, which is also what we're dedicating the show to today, but the memory of the Belarusian para-athlete who drowned during training right before Worlds this year.
Yeah, that was amazing. And he was such a accomplished and courageous, you know, I read a little bit more about his life and his accomplishments. So
yeah,
we're thinking about him. All right, y'all. I'm going to end the broadcast. We'll see you on the 20th at noon. Our new time is noon. See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
You guys want to